Bob Thome Jr. is a District 11 Oneida County Board Crescent Wards 1 and 3 County Supervisor for Oneida County. He sits on the Extension and Land and Water committees, among others, and has been working on water issues in that role for quite a while. Bob is joining us today to talk about a challenge that's emerged in Oneida County around clear cutting to water and incompatibility with local shoreland rules. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm happy to be here. All right, so I'm talking today about clear cutting in Oneida County, how it relates to the ordinance and what we're working towards or trying to work towards, primarily in the access and viewing corridor of the vegetative buffer zone. So the starting point really is the following few slides are showing a property in Oneida County that generated over 40 complaints. It led to a joint effort to propose an amendment to the Oneida County Shoreland Protection Ordinance. As of today, it's still not approved, it's still pending, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. The effort to bring the amendment forward came from a cooperative effort, really, of Oneida County Planning and Zoning, the Corporate Council, some members of the Wisconsin DNR, several citizen property owners of Oneida County, and me. So this all starts on Two Sisters Lake. If you look here from June of 2019, this comes off of the county's GIS. There's a little peninsula here. This is primarily hemlocks, so these trees are very, very old. And it was a very beautiful shoreline. So in August of 2019, this particular property has about 200 feet of frontage. They clear cut about 75 feet wide from left to right here and back to the setback. So this is in August in 2019. This is in 2020, a year later. And still, we have no vegetation on the hill here. They're starting to do some construction. At this point, we're already starting, the Two Sisters folks are coming to the planning and zoning department and making inquiries and questioning what they're doing about this. A year later, here we go. It looks pretty much the same. We've built some steps into the hill. We've did a retaining wall here, and we now have a platform, and we've got a bunch of rocks in the water. Here we are today, same type of thing. So what we focused on is what does the Wisconsin DNR's 115 say? And that's what our ordinance is based upon. And it's really to protect natural scenic beauty, fish and wildlife habitat, and water quality. We made some provisions here that we wanted included in the proposal. We also asked that a land disturbance definition be brought forward that would help in determining what can and cannot be disturbed in the vegetative buffer zone and in the access and viewing corridor. So the proposed SPO amendment really focused on 4 major items. I'm not going to talk about the physical dimensions of the access and viewing corridor in this. This has really a state statute problem with Act 55 and Chapter 59 and the DNR's 1115. There's a discrepancy in the definitions of the physical dimensions. But we'll talk about clear cutting, we'll talk about vegetation, definition of vegetation, and again, definition of land disturbances. So what is the vegetative buffer zone? It's really an area that is as wide as the property. So if you have 100 feet of frontage, the vegetative buffer zone is 100 feet by 35 feet deep. So anything from the lake, 35 feet inward is the vegetative buffer zone. And there is no land disturbance allowed within that vegetative buffer zone, except for creating an access and viewing corridor. The access and viewing corridor, the way our ordinance reads is the county may allow select removal of trees, shrubs, and vegetative in the vegetative buffer zone to create an access and viewing corridor. Within the access and viewing corridor, within this white little box, this 35 square box, you could put a boathouse, you can put a walkway, but you can't put anything else. And according to our ordinance, this land should be vegetated. So 35 feet wide, 35 feet deep, that is the access and viewing corridor that you are allowed to create within the vegetative buffer zone. I simply call it the 35-foot rule. So if somebody asks me something about this, I say it's really just, it's simply a 35-foot box for every 100 feet of frontage. And there's some technicalities in there that I won't talk about, but for simply talking purposes, for what we call the counter test. So if John Q. Public comes into the planning and zoning and asks, how big of an area can I make my access and viewing corridor? I want to see the lake. I want to put a boathouse. I want to put a walkway down to the lake to get safe access to the lake. How big can that be? Simply put, it's 35 feet by 35 feet. So the only thing that you could fit in that 35 feet is a boathouse and a walkway. Any structures have to be further than 35 feet away. Your viewing corridor has to be in that 35-foot square where the boathouse is. You can't put your boathouse over here on the right or the left and then have your access and viewing corridor there. Theoretically, when the county was regulating docks and piers, your pier and your dock had to be fit in that access and viewing corridor as well. But the county chose not to regulate piers and docks a few years back. So I don't have that in my illustration. So vegetation definition. So the access and viewing corridor must have vegetation. And I'm going to show you what the proposed definition, which was brought forth by Land and Water in Oneida County as a recommendation to planning and development for the amendment going into the Shoreland Protection Ordinance. So what has been proposed from Land and Water to planning and development is what's the definition of vegetation? It's native or non-invasive live plant material which will mitigate erosion or storm water runoff. That's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward, I think. You can say, what is non-native? What is native? Is grass native? Is it not? We could have that discussion all day long. And if we had 10 people talking about it, we'd have 10 different answers to that. The access and viewing corridor must be maintained with vegetation. Sand, gravel, rock, or other similar materials shall be prohibited. Right. So, can I have some? Can I have a sand beach? No, you can't create a sand beach. You have to have live plant material. And then the vegetation within that is it shall contain 3 distinct layers, including a tree canopy, shrub layer, and ground cover layer, except for closed canopy forest types such as pine and hemlock. These 3 distinct layers really come from Land and Water's restoration efforts. When they go onto a piece of property that needs restoration, they will look at trees, they will look at shrubs, and then they'll look at ground cover. So there's three distinct layers that we wanted included in that vegetation definition. So here again, land and water works to conserve land and water resources, meet local soil, water, and related natural resource priorities. They are in the business of restoring shorelines. That's what they do as part of their everyday work. And they repair the damages done when our ordinances are not complied with. And I think this is I'm going to understate this a bit, but our Oneida County Land and Water Department right now is overwhelmed with requests for restoration of shorelines. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough resources to handle all the requests for restoration projects. Land disturbance. Somebody says, well, what do you mean by land disturbance? We don't, and again, you could have 10 people talk about it. So what we're in the proposed amendment, we have put a definition of what is land disturbance. And so you can read this here, but it's really anything you could think about that you're disturbing the soil is called a land disturbance. I call it the battlegrounds. I like pictures. They're easier for me than words. Sometimes my attention span's not so long. So I call this the battlegrounds. And I'll show you some slides here that illustrate compliance and non-compliance with the current shoreline protection ordinance, as well as the proposed ordinance. So you take a look here. This is a non-compliant lot in Oneida County. If you look at these big boulders along the shoreline, this lake a few years ago was very low in their water level. So the water you see here on the right-hand side of the screen was actually back here where this line of rocks are. So there was dirt, ground here to the right, same way here. So, but it was muddy, it was, swampy. So this landowner decided, well, I don't like that. So I'm going to add a bunch of rocks and I'm going to fill this all in with small gravel, small rocks. Well, this part right now is it's in the enforcement stage of the planning and zoning department. And I'm hoping, and the lake obviously has come up now because the water is where it used to be. And you can see some of these other lots over here on the right are flooded. On the other side, to the left here, they're flooded as well. So the challenge, of course, is when zoning comes here and says you have to take that all out. How are they going to do that? And is that going to cause more problem than what this is causing? So anyway, this is I think a pretty clear example of a non-compliant piece of property. And you can see they didn't clear cut it because they got one tree here. Here's another non-compliant illustration. This has been totally clear cut. They took out all the vegetation. Probably a month before this picture was taken, there was huge, I'm talking huge, probably 75-foot tall red pines all around this property. And this is what it looks like today. When they initially did this before zoning came in to enforce this, there was no silt fence. This was not graded like this. They just came in and tore everything up. And then when the rain came, it washed everything into the lake. Again, another non-compliant visual illustration. Here's a great illustration of land disturbance. So you can see this was done in the wintertime. This was done pretty close to when it started, after it snowed, because there's no snow on the ground here. So what they did is they came in and excavated this area, that looks like about these, if these guys are 6 feet tall, 4 feet of the frontage on the lake. Nice smooth walk out into the lake here. I can tell you, you can think about what's coming right after this. Okay, so this is not compliant. This is not allowed. Oh, and this is what it looks like today. And I could talk to you about a half an hour about the things that are wrong with this picture right now, but we don't have time for that. But this again is an enforcement. There's some people that probably recognize this because they on the Oneida County Lake and River Association live nearby this. And you can't. And how do you fix this, right? Here is a picture of a compliant access and viewing corridor. This property has 250 feet of frontage. The viewing corridor is about 75 feet wide, 70 feet wide. This piece was clear cut in 2007. And now 2021, 2020, this is what it looks like now with all natural vegetation restoring the access and viewing corridor. And this is actually, you know, if you just take 35 feet, remember I talked about the 35-foot square there. This is like 300 feet. So here's a compliant illustration. Not perfect, but not bad. You got trees, you got shrubs, you got a little ground cover. Here's a very good example. There's no, you can see from the house, you can see from the deck, you can see the lake. You can't see from the slope steps, but this is a good example of what the lakefront property ordinance should make the property look like. This is an interesting one, I think. This came directly from the DNR. They supplied this photo. So this would be a compliant visual illustration for vegetation. Okay, because we have grass all the way down to the lake. The guy just turned his lawnmower around in the lake. And you go like, okay, well, that's not perfect. It's sloped, you got grass, you don't have a decent ground cover. But what makes this non-compliant really is that they have clear cut the entire lot. So they haven't just taken a 35-foot square out of here, or if they had a 200-foot piece of frontage, it would be 70. They've clear cut the whole thing. So they've obviously did some excavating here. They clear cut it. So from a vegetation standpoint, this is okay, but from a land disturbance and destroying the vegetative buffer zone, not so much. So what we're working towards with the proposed amendment is we're trying to clarify what the physical dimensions of the access and viewing corridor are supposed to be. That is, that part of the proposal is pending and in the hands of our state legislators for consideration and correction. We've got number 3 down here. This is the definition of vegetation and what's required. That's been forwarded by Oneida County Land and Water to the Oneida County Planning and Development for consideration. The land disturbance definition is in the proposed amendment, and there's a proposal in there for select cutting versus clear cutting. The county right now allows clear cutting. They're supposed to require vegetation within that access and viewing corridor. We're pushing for some select cutting, which is rather than clear cutting, which has been a very, very uphill battle. And that is the end. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those.